Walter, we're going to just have a conversation just like it's you and me, okay?
You got it.
And I'm going to share it.
I'm honored to be talking to you.
I'm honored to be talking to you. But I'll tell you a personal story. As Harriet said, I was just promoted to full professor. And, you know, maybe it's the COVID fog, or maybe it's my questions of what's next in higher education. But for some reason, I just haven't been excited like I should be. And I think my lack of excitement, or not my ability to place my emotions in the right place, is because I feel like there's this unknown around the future of higher education. Where will I be 5 years from now? Will I still be teaching? What will the students be like? What will the resources be like? And I think what's really great about the summit is the summit really puts all of those pieces together and allows us to reflect on them in a really safe community. And as I prepared to talk to you and I looked at your background and looked at your work, something that really stuck with me was your messaging of look backwards, sideways, and forward to understand where you're going. And so what I think I want to start with is when you look backwards, what is it that we should know and we should see, especially people that are new in the academy? What should we understand about where we've come and how it impacts where we're going? So let's start with the backwards part. What should we know as we look backwards? What should we take? What nuggets should be important to us?
Glad to. By the way, I am thrilled to be talking with this audience. These are the people who are going to lead higher education into the future. So, backward. The book, Great Upheaval, looks in three directions, and the backward direction is this way. This isn't the first time higher education has undergone dramatic change. During the Industrial Revolution, the nation moved from a national analog industrial economy, or moved to one, and it's now moving to a global digital information economy. In essence, what happened was, during the Industrial Revolution, higher education was transformed. The colonial college, or the classic college, became universities. It became technical schools. It became community colleges. And we're going to witness the same kind of change today. And what stands out in all of this is that we're going through exactly the same stages. First, social criticism. Second, institutions denying that change is necessary. Third, broad-scale experimentation. Fourth, the creation of models. Fifth, diffusion of those models. Sixth, standardization for practice. And seventh, integration and scaling up. Where we are today is, we're somewhere between 3 and 4. We're somewhere between lots of experimentation and creating new models to guide the future.
So you say we're somewhere between 3 and 4. And so how does being in this limbo between 3 and 4 impact the student experience and the faculty experience?
I think the limbo doesn't matter a lot. What happens is these aren't neat stages. They're really sloppy. They overlap, they jiggle into one another. But what really stands out is, where are we going to be at the end of this? And that's what we're building toward. And one of the interesting things about the pandemic is that it accelerated all kinds of changes that would have happened anyway. So, online education, more students coming back and asking for upskilling and reskilling. It also pushed certain institutions more toward the edge. And what it also did was, it basically showed that we have new providers coming to higher education. And those providers did extraordinarily well during the pandemic in contrast to higher education. So what we need to realize in terms of moving into the future is that we're moving into a learner-centered future. which competition is going to come from a whole bunch of new providers. And whether those providers are Coursera, or they're the local museum, or corporations like Google, or even the local fire department, all are getting into the business of higher education. And they're offering cheaper online education than we can. And the other thing is, students are going to have a lot more choice. They can choose all kinds of options for higher education.
And I think what that leads us up to looking sideways, because I think the points that you just raised really is what happens when you look sideways. I think for so long in the traditional higher education model, we didn't look sideways. We never thought that the fire department or Google or an Amazon would actually be in competition with us in terms of offering higher education solutions. So I want to hear you speak a little bit more on how faculty can look sideways. What should we be gaining when we look sideways?
When we look sideways, what happens is, our goal in writing this was to look at 3 industries, knowledge industries, that were forced to change more quickly than higher education. And we looked at film, we looked at music, and we looked at newspapers. Each of them ended up being disrupted by technology. But the important things we can learn as faculty are that we need to look forward, that we can't keep doing what we've always done and expect to succeed. When I spoke to lots of college presidents during the pandemic, what they told me was they couldn't wait for it to end to get back to fall 2019. That's never going to happen again. And these are industries that didn't recognize what was going on around them. They weren't aware of their competitors. They tried to adapt to everything that came along or resisted change as long as possible. And I guess what we learn now is that we're moving our institutions to where the puck is going to be, not where it was yesterday. We're looking toward the future in terms of what we do. So we as faculty, what are the most important things we can do? Recognize that we're moving into a world that's going to become increasingly learner-centered. What we also need faculty to do is, we really need you to experiment now. There are all kinds of tools that are becoming available to us that didn't exist even a few years ago. We're going to need you to build the models that guide the future. We're going to need you to speak up. We're going to need you to be leaders in your institutions in terms of creating a new tomorrow. And we're going to need you to build the university of the future.
So looking at your last pillar of looking forward, there's a question that came in that I want to pose to you. And I think it's part of this idea of looking forward. And that is, how do we better align higher education learning with workforce readiness and job skills? And I want to pause and give you a second to think, because my journey in higher ed, I've always seen a distinction between what happens in a 4-year institution and what happens maybe in a 2-year institution for comparison purposes. And when I was coming up, I always thought that the workforce readiness job skills conversation happened more at the 2-year level. I never thought that it would be entered into the 4-year institution model in the way that it is now. And so I'm assuming that the market, the students, the learners are demanding more of an application between what the classroom is teaching me and being on the job ready day one. So when we look forward, what nuggets should we be taking with us to help prepare us for the next COVID or the next disruption or the next shutdown? Like, what should we be as faculty thinking about how to prepare for that?
3 points. Higher education's always been in the career business. When Harvard was started in 1636, the rationale is to train ministers. When the medieval university was created, what they wanted to do is give people skills to get jobs. And that's persisted. When higher education is truly successful, it has its feet in two different worlds. One world is the library. That's our heritage. That's the whole heritage of education. And the other foot is in the street, which is careers and life today. And what happens when the world changes really quickly is that higher education manages to hold to the library, but it loses traction with the street. And so what's critical in the next few years that we redo that, not because we're being asked for something that's never been done before, but because it's what we've always done. And what happens is in every age and every time, the skills that students need are different. Our students are going to enter a world that's changing dramatically. They're going to go through a period of profound change, unceasing change, and accelerating change. And what we need to do is give them the skills to live in that world. And that isn't how you weld. What that is the skill of how do you think? Critical thinking, creativity, continuous learning, character, morality. What it also is the ability to work in teams. There are a whole series of things that are new today. It's the ability to work across cultures. It's all of those skills that students are going to need to thrive in the 21st century. And the simple reality is we got to put our career services offices on steroids to help our students, not what they've always been.
So there's a question that's posed to both of us, Arthur, and it is, how do either of you see the unbundling of the curriculum as a real and significant piece of the future of higher ed? And I'll tell you from my perspective, what I always thought the unbundling would be was the demise of majors. Because I think what that has done is it's siloed education in a way that's really negatively impacted the student experience. You know, many of the days when a student comes into my office and says things like, oh, I have an art history test today. I don't know why I have to take that silly class. Why does that even matter? And they don't understand how art, how dance, how music, how poetry is impacting the whole student. So I always think my unbundling is diminishing the idea of a major, and you just walk in and you really create it more about just learning new things. So that would be my answer. That was from Christopher Nelson. So shout out to Christopher Nelson for asking that question. But Arthur, I want to know what you think. What's the unbundling of the curriculum? What would that be in your opinion?
I think what's going to happen is that students are going to demand it. And the way it's going to come is that they're already used to getting songs instead of albums, articles instead of newspapers, and they're going to ask that of higher education. But more importantly, I think we're headed to a new majority. And then new majority is being forced by three things. One is job loss during COVID. The second one is expanding automation. And the third one is defining half-life of knowledge. So what students are going to come to us for are not degrees, are not four-year programs. They're going to come to us for upskilling and reskilling throughout their lives. We're talking about short programs that are more likely to lead to micro-credentials than they are to lead to degrees. And we're talking about doing that frequently. So in essence, I think higher education is going to have the choice. Do we want to educate those students, or do we want to leave it to the new providers? And my feeling is we're going to gobble up those students.
So I want to ask you, I love how your answers always incorporate backwards, sideways, and forwards. And I hear it in everything that you say, because you drop a little bit of history in everything that you say. So I appreciate you doing that. But I want to ask you, what inspired you to write The Great Upheaval? You're an icon in higher education. And as you sit and you reflect on everything, what inspires you to say what you're saying in your upcoming book?
By the way, that icon part, can you tell that to my wife and my children?
I sure will.
They're unaware of that. The reason for writing the book was we're living in this time in which gazillion books are coming out about the future of higher education. And some say we're going to work our way through it by adaptation. Some say it's going to be disrupted. The president of Harvard now says we're going to do it by adaptation. But one of his most famous professors, late Clayton Christensen, said it's going to be disruption. Higher education isn't going to look anything like what it looks like now. And what I wanted to do was study it. And for much of my career, I've been writing about the future of higher ed. And I realized I'd use 3 different techniques. One was historical, looking backward. One was looking forward at the demographics, the economics, and the technology. And the other was looking sideways. I've been doing that for forever. And finally, I thought, let's do them all simultaneously and see if they give any clue whether they agree with each other. And I was shocked. I went into the study without any biases in terms of what I expected to find. And every one of those ways looking at it produced comparable results.
So I'm going to ask a couple questions that have been submitted. This is from Emily Jones, so shout out to Emily. Emily teaches English and communication courses that focus on critical thinking, teamwork, cross-cultural communication skills, but she's trying to match that with a larger program, or a larger program and curriculum is very difficult. Students are used to individual items, but the integration is lacking, in my opinion. She wanted to provide some thoughts on that statement.
It's a great question. I wonder, are there any more great questions that you could ask me instead of that one? Let me say this. It's the hard part about being an innovator, which is to say that you're trying to do things that haven't been done before, that may be essential. And the only way I know how to do that is to integrate them, if you're a faculty member, into what already exists. My inclination as a faculty member and as administrator had been that that's very, very hard to do. And my choice always was to do it, how would I, at the periphery, create a new course, create a new unit, create something different that doesn't exist. It's much easier to get that adopted than it is to have your department adopt new pedagogies. Mm-hmm. Oh, one other thing, help them own it. I once visited a college that was introduced despite the faculty voting it down. What the new president did, or the new dean of that unit, was invite faculty from all across the college to advise him, to work on projects. And lo and behold, when he got grants, he shared the money with others. And the end result was that things were adopted all across the university. Not only that, when they adopted them, they attributed it to the new unit, which never happens. So that, yeah, co-opt your colleagues and ease your students into it. We got to accept the students we have, not the students we want. Ease them into a new pedagogy.
So we have another question. I think I have time for 2. And this was submitted by Mike Wald. And he says, don't a lot of employers use higher education qualifications as a simple filter to try and pick the best students?
And the answer is yes. That's what we've done historically. We may be moving toward a change. Every time I'm going to do it again, forgive me. In the Industrial Revolution, what happened was we invented all kinds of new degrees and credentials. I mean, micro-credentials have been around since 1799. So that what I think we're going to see is a growing number of employers that are saying a college degree isn't essential. What we're looking for is a set of skills. I think over the years ahead, particularly as we find more people who want to be upskilled and reskilled, we're going to find those credentials gaining in force. Right now, Google is offering a program at IT at Coursera. And I can take the same program at the local community college or regional public university. However, it's going to take me longer at those other institutions. It's going to cost me more. So I have the choice of getting Google certification or getting a degree from another college. Which do you think students are going to choose? Which will employers choose?
Arthur, I don't know, because I'll tell you why I don't know. Because I think what the pandemic has shown us is the importance of community and human interaction. And so when you look at the number of mental health issues, both for students and faculty, from isolation, I think the pandemic has sort of shown us that community and people is a little bit more important than we thought. And so just having a skill set might not be enough. So that's why I say, I don't know. So yeah, with your example, yes, I could go and do it online and it'll be cheaper and faster. But what I'm missing is community and community connection, that human connection. So I don't know if people will continue to choose that, because we've had this almost 18-month gap of what it feels like to have human interaction and community ripped from you. And I don't know how we really feel about that anymore. So
I'm sorry. Oh, my sense of this one is that it's not either or. Right now, if you look at the number of students who are 18 to 22, full-time and living on campus, that's 18% of all college students. Diane Dean and I did a study of college students. We found was they were withdrawing from college life. Most of their activities were outside of college. And we found among older students that what they wanted was service, convenience, low cost, and quality. They didn't want to pay for anything they weren't using. So I think that lots of people want this. I think even if we're online, no matter where we're doing this, we can build community. And that's going to be the next stage in online education. Now, don't get me wrong. I was president of a residential liberal arts college. I went to a residential liberal arts college. My daughters went to residential liberal arts colleges. I really like them a lot. But I think with the changes that are coming, that option has to be available for those people who want it, and everybody doesn't want it. However, we need to make the other options that are available as human, as communal as possible.
Well, I'm not sure how to prepare. So I want to ask you for some advice. I'm asking for a friend. You know how people say that? I'm asking for a friend.
Absolutely.
How should I tell my friends that are part of our community today, how should we prepare for what's next? And reminding you that we have multiple disciplines represented in our community out there. But how should we prepare? What do we have to look forward to? And how can we be competitive as faculty and instructors?
And what I'd say is, look, this is a daunting time. And with all the change around us and the fact that it's continuing, and it's not obvious where everything's going to land. That's the negative. The positive is very few generations have been given the opportunity that we are. We have a chance to put our fingerprints on the future of what higher education looks like. We get to build it. That's the opportunity. That's the challenge. And that's what we have to accept today.
Well, with that, Arthur, I'm going to wrap us up. I think, as usual, this has been a powerful summit. We've talked about student and faculty support and the importance of that. We've talked about how our roles as educators impact workforce development. We've talked about the importance of creating a diverse environment for not only students, but for faculty and colleagues. And you've really helped us think about 3 important points. And I think, one, I can't wait for your book, Grade Up People, to come out. But one of the things that I know I'm going to take forward in my thinking is thinking about what's backwards, sideways, and forward whenever I'm presented with something. You know, where do we come from? What's beside me, and where are we going to go? I think is a really good way to think about almost all the themes that we discussed in this summit. I thank you for your brain and your expertise in being here and sharing with us, and the community that we've created, just the two of us online in this time together. So thank you.
It's been wonderful. I really enjoyed being with you. And I have an incredible desire to read any new book that comes out about fraud in the next few years.
Good.
And for this audience, we're counting on you. This is going to be an exciting time to be a faculty member. You ought to have fun with it as well. And how often do you get to build tomorrow? Thank you all.